Hi friends, I'm Sarah. Welcome back to my channel, Sunset Bow Tarot. So today I wanted to do a response to a VR that's been going around, and it's kind of a fun one. It's been a while since I have done a solo video without the other two of the three girls. It's just been a really busy summer, and so I haven't had a lot of time to make videos, but I figured that this was a fun tag that was sort of an easy way back in, because the tag is last 10 decks, and basically all you do for this tag is show the last 10 decks you've acquired. So this seemed like a lot of fun. This tag was started by Jonathan Daly, so I will put a link to his original video in the cards, and so please go check that out if you're interested, and check out the tag. There's been lots of responses to this one, and it's a really fun one. So I'm going to go over my last 10 decks, and I'm going to kind of go over them in backwards order, starting with the most recent deck I got. So the most recent deck I got is this one. This is the Ethereal Visions Luna edition. And it's kind of a roundabout story as to why I ended up picking this one up. I don't know if any of you guys have ever done this before, where you see a deck and you suddenly realize that it's like the exact aesthetic of a friend of yours that you read tarot for relatively frequently. And so you like feel like you want to buy the deck just to read for that person. But that's basically what happened with this one. Basically, I owned the original Ethereal Visions a while back, and it's a beautiful deck, but I just sort of never really fully connected with it. And so I ended up passing it along. And then this one came out and I liked it better than the original. But, you know, I was sort of still thinking, oh, well, you know, since I got rid of the first version of this, maybe I don't need this second version. But basically what happened is the other week, I went out for brunch with a friend for her birthday. And the very next day we recorded a Three Girls One Monthly Catch-Up where Julie talked about this deck, and this is the deck she had been using a lot in the month of August. And I just suddenly realized, because the friend whose birthday it had been was like on my mind, and I realized that this is like the perfect deck for her. Like everything about this is her aesthetic, like the purple and turquoise, the way it's like super Art Nouveau. She's someone who even, I should show some cards. She's someone who even like really loves anything iridescent. Like she loves like peacock feathers, and she collects carnival glass. So like the hollow gilding on this is perfect. Like everything about this screamed this one particular friend of mine. And so I just like suddenly needed to have it because I read tarot for her quite frequently, and like this is like her deck. Like this is the perfect deck for her. So so I just bought it. It's mass market. It's not that expensive. It's a really beautiful deck, and it was just one of those things where suddenly I needed to have it just because it reminded me of one particular friend. And this has happened to me before. I actually, when I first got the Fountain Tarot, I got that one because that one also reminded me of a particular friend, and that deck's become a real workhorse for me, and I use it for lots of different people all the time now. But the reason I originally bought it was because it made me think of a specific person that I read tarot for. So in any case, this is a really lovely deck. I'm very excited. I haven't really worked with it much yet, but you know, the next time I go over to that friend's house and read tarot for her, this one's definitely coming with me. So anyway, again, that is the Ethereal Visions Luna edition. So next up is one that has been showing up on a lot of people's probably lists of recently acquired decks. This is, of course, the Thistledown Oracle. I am a huge fan of Adam Ohler's artwork. I am a huge fan of both the Oak, Ash, and Thorn deck and the Smoke, Ash, and Ember deck. I own both of them, and so even though I'm kind of like, you know, I'm always telling myself I shouldn't be buying oracles, and I don't need more oracles, and I don't use the ones that I already have enough, but it was just pretty much impossible to resist this. I just love the artwork too much, and I do think it's a really well done oracle in terms of the keywords. You know, I think that it is a really nice assortment of keywords. It's a good sized deck. It has a good number of cards for an oracle. It has a few extra like art cards in it that you can kind of choose how to interpret them. So one of them is this thistle, and then there's a couple of others which I think are supposed to represent like maybe yes or no or positive or negative. You know, you can kind of read those however you want, but it's just beautiful, and I was very, very excited to get this. I did pre-order it, and yeah, it was kind of inevitable that I was going to end up buying this one. So next up, I'm actually going to talk about these two decks together, just because the only reason I got this Oracle was because for some reason there was some part of me that really thought this Oracle belonged with this tarot, and I don't entirely know why, but for some reason they were like sort of screaming out to be together. I think there's just a slightly similar feel to them in terms of like the setting. So anyway, the tarot deck is the Fantasy Garden Tarot, and I've been using this deck for like pretty much exclusively ever since I got it. I really, really love this deck. I think it's absolutely beautiful. This is by a Ukrainian artist. It is available on Etsy, and this deck is just stunning. I love the artwork of it. It's very much up my alley in that it's a deck that is really focused on a particular place, and the sort of landscape and the setting is very important to the overall feel and aesthetic of the deck. So again, it's called the Fantasy Garden. It all seems to take place in this sort of big formal garden that seems to be kind of like maybe in a city, and all of the suit symbols, well, some of it also maybe takes place sort of slightly outside the city. All of the suit symbols are kind of in the form of like large sort of like garden statuary or large like architectural items in the artwork, which I just think is really cool. And this deck is so beautiful to me. I don't know. The artist of this deck did it with ballpoint pens. All of this artwork is done with ballpoint pens. I have no idea how that's even possible, but it just turned out gorgeously, and I really, really love the look and feel of it. You know, it's definitely very, very Rider-Waite-Smith. It's definitely a deck that's not in any way a challenge to read with, but it just has such a beautiful feel to it. But I think it's because of that sort of sense of place and that kind of feeling that this deck, it almost feels like it sort of takes place like within a garden, within a city, you know, and because of that, I think is why all of a sudden this Oracle suddenly started to feel appealing to me. This is the Citadel Oracle. This is by Fez Inkwright. I think that this was originally like a smaller bonus deck that was issued with a different Liminal 11 deck, and then it was really popular, so it kind of got expanded into this full deck. But this is really like an archetypes deck, and I haven't had super good luck with archetypes decks in the past. The only one I think I still have is the one by Nick Bantock, but I really feel like I hang on to that more for the artwork than for I don't read with it all that often. I just really love the artwork. So so this one is more like, I've been working with this one already, and it just already feels much more readable. But the idea of this deck is that it really kind of takes place inside a city called the Citadel, and the guidebook kind of tells a story of almost your journey through the city and meeting all of these different people that are archetypes that appear in the cards. And the cards themselves are really cool. That these are the backs, and they're this, you know, kind of elongated hexagonal shape. They have foil on them. They're really beautiful. It's a really well done. I actually read this deck with reversals, weirdly enough, because I've been working with this one for a couple weeks now, several weeks. And the reversals, I don't know, they really work in this deck for some reason. Like, I don't know what it is, but this deck, I accidentally shuffled in reversals, and then it just sort of felt like it wanted to be read that way. So this is the very, very rare occasion where I actually read a deck with reversals. But this is just really a cool deck. It has different suits almost, where, you know, different kind of groups of people are you know, the individual suits, and each of them is expressed by this little kind of elemental symbol here. And then it's really nice in terms of the way that it's laid out, because it does have the name of the archetype and then a couple of keywords for that particular archetype. So it just, I don't know, something about it, something about the feel, again, of the fact that this deck takes place within a specific location really made it feel like it wanted to go with Fantasy Garden Tarot. And it's not even like they necessarily are in any way similar aesthetically. It was just something about the feel of it. I don't know, but I've really enjoyed working with this. Actually, I've really found myself enjoying this a lot, and working with it with the Fantasy Garden. So it's just a cool Oracle. I've gotten a lot out of it in terms of, you know, the first couple of weeks that I've been working with it. And so, yeah, I really like this one, actually. And I can't explain necessarily why the reversals work for me in this one, but it just did. Like, I accidentally shuffled some in, and then a card came up reversed, and instead of turning it over, I wanted to read it reversed. So I have no explanation for why that is, but that's what I've been doing. So anyway, again, this is the Citadel by Fez Ingrid. So before I got the Citadel deck, the Oracle deck that I was working with primarily was this one, which is a Forest Fae. I did a daily draw from this for a month probably, and I just really like this little deck. This is one of those little rock pool, just kind of mini decks that comes in a little cute magnetic box. And I've owned one or two of these before in the past, but I never held on to them because I didn't particularly like them or sort of know how to fit them into my practice. But something about this one, something about the combination of the artwork and the title and the little message on it, they really work for me. It just, in the time that I worked with it, it really gave me a sort of very pithy, poignant message every day that I drew a card. It was sort of like right on in terms of what I needed. And so I really liked this one. I really am happy that I have it now. I'm excited for the next time. I feel like pulling this one out, you know, after a month, I sort of decided that I wanted to start working with the Citadel in conjunction with the Fantasy Garden. So I put this one away temporarily, but I just really enjoyed working with it. So I'm very glad I bought it. And yeah, this is just a really sweet little deck. So the previous deck that I had purchased of my most recent 10 decks is the Zerner Farber Tarot. This has also been known in the past as the Enchanted Tarot. This is another, Julie from Peekaboo Rose made me do it because this is another one where I saw it on her channel. This is a deck that I had kind of had my eye on for a really long time. I really love the aesthetic of it. I love the way that it's collage done with a lot of fabric incorporated. I think it's a really beautiful deck. The problem was always that it was always either like temporarily out of print or only available in a format that I didn't like. Like the prior one to this, you know, this one's nice and small. It's like maybe a little bit smaller than like regular tarot size. It's got nice matte gilded edges. Like, this is a very usable size for me. The version of this deck that was available prior to that was this like collector's edition set where the cards were like, they were giant. They were like this big, I swear. So I never picked up that version because it was like, I'm never going to be able to work with those giant cards. But then as soon as this one came out and I saw this version on Julie's channel, I was like, okay, now it is finally time for me to pick up the Zerner Farber Tarot that's been on my wish list for a long time. And it is just beautiful. I haven't worked with it yet. I've only shuffled it a couple of times. I do think that this size and kind of form factor is really nice to shuffle. So I think they did a lovely job in this edition of it. And I'm really excited to work with it. So it'll probably be, you know, maybe more towards like early next year that I'll probably start working with it. Or I don't know, maybe later in the fall. We'll have to see how I do with some of the other decks that I'm going to show. But this one is just, yeah, it's just really lovely. And it seems to have a really nice guidebook. And I'm looking forward to it. So the previous deck that I had gotten, this was a lovely gift from a subscriber to my channel who saw me talk about how I was interested in this deck in one of the 3 Girls 1 Deck lives, and she sent me this copy of it as a gift, which was so incredibly lovely. Thank you so much. I'm really excited about this deck. It's just adorable. Like I said, I've had my eye on it for a long time, but it was one of those ones where it was like, oh, I probably don't need it, even though I really love it. So I guess I'll just live without it. And then getting it as a gift was just amazing. So this is, of course, the Boo Tarot. And I cannot wait to use this one in October. I think this is going to be sort of my like October and Halloween deck this year. Because it's just Honestly, it's so lovely. The artwork is so adorable. It's really cute. All of the ghosts on the majors have like little like holographic sparkles on them, which is awesome. I really, really love it. The person who sent this to me, you know, had been interested in letting it go because she wasn't a fan of the cardstock. I really don't mind it at all. It's very flexible. I find it very easy to shuffle. I don't think it's very, it's not very snappy. Like it kind of stays bowed if you bend it, but that doesn't really bother me all that much. It's perfectly nice to shuffle, and so I'm really, really excited about using it. This is just the cutest deck. And also, like, oddly enough, and I think I've mentioned this before, like, I'm actually kind of like scared of ghosts. Like, ghosts scare me. Ghost movies scare me. Like, that kind of thing scares me. And so this is just such a cute, like, deck on this whole concept of ghosts. Like, it almost sort of feels like it could heal my relationship with the idea of ghosts in a way. Like, I don't know, but that's kind of probably sounds ridiculous, but that is sort of how I feel about it. And it's just so sweet and adorable. So I am very, very excited to use this one. So this one was very, very much purchased on a whim. It was definitely, Heather made me do it because I saw it on her channel, and it's a very inexpensive deck, and it's a very, very well-made, well-designed, well-crafted deck for a mass market deck, and especially given the price. So this is the Squid Cake Marseille by Jess Roller, and I just thought that this deck was so sweet and cute. I haven't worked with it yet. I only really have one other like actual Marseille style Marseille deck, which is the Marshmallow Marseille. And so I felt like there was room in my collection for another cute, small, pastel forward Marseille deck. And I have, as you can see, this one's still in order. I haven't worked with it yet. Well, maybe I have shuffled it a few times. I can't remember. But it just is so cute, and I love the overall design and layout and color palette of the cards. I love the size. I love the pink edging. I have looked through the guidebook a little bit, and it is actually a really cool, well done guidebook for a Marseille deck. Like, it actually gives you things to think about visually in terms of the layout of the pips and you know, the important aspects of reading Marseille that are actually included in this tiny little awesome guidebook. So I think it's a really well done package, and it was just one of those ones where I was like, you know what, I'm just going to add this to my collection because I know I'll work with it someday. I can use always more practice with Marseille, and this is just a fun little Marseille deck that I would love to have hanging around in my collection. So again, this is the Squid Cake Marseille. The deck previous to that I had purchased was the Buffy the Vampire Slayer tarot deck, which is a deck that I was really excited about. Actually, I am a huge, like, massive Buffy fan. I have watched the whole series through multiple times, and I really, really love Buffy. And I was excited for this deck because unlike a lot of the other Inside Editions decks, I thought that the artwork of it was really cool, and I knew that it had all fully scenic minors, which a lot of the other Insight Editions decks are just pip decks. Nothing wrong with a pip deck, but you know, for a fandom deck, I want a little more thought put into it beyond just the majors, you know. So you know, I was excited about this deck, and we did a whole long discussion of this on 3 Girls 1 Deck, and I'll link that up in the cards if you're interested. We did like a 2-hour live talking through this deck. But ultimately, I ended up putting this deck in purgatory. I haven't really spent much time using it, and it's not because it's a bad deck. Like, I don't think that it's a bad deck. I was just disappointed in it because it wasn't really quite what I wanted in a Buffy deck. So to start with, I don't know, probably everybody knows by now the myriad issues with the guidebook of this deck. Most importantly, just that the guidebook is like wrong. Like it's like they printed an old draft of the guidebook that was done before all the card art was completed. And so a lot of the entries in this guidebook talk about like what were maybe like older, different envisioned versions of the cards that are totally not what ended up in the final artwork. And so like, that's just a profound fuck up. Like, that's so bad, you know, and it really does a disservice, I think, to the work of the writer in writing the guidebook, because it is a pretty well done guidebook on the whole, where it's correct. But you can see all of the places, like I've flagged all of the issues that I found in this guidebook. And you can see that they all got squished from being in the box, but you can see like all my little kitty flags here. Like I put a lot of flags in this guidebook, because it just was really messed up. So, in any case, so that's part of the problem, but you know, the guidebook alone wouldn't have been enough to really put me off the deck. It's also just that from the standpoint of being a really big Buffy fan, and I think this is always kind of the danger with a fandom deck, it's that, you know, like I would have picked something different for a lot of these cards. A lot of them work fine, and some of them are really quite good. Like this, you know, this is a great 2 of Pentacles. This is a great 9 of Pentacles. But there's just a solid number of cards in this deck where I'm like, okay, I feel like I could have picked something better for that card than what they actually went with in terms of a scene from the show or a character from the show. And so as a result of that, you know, it just is hard for me to get excited about using it, because I know that I'm going to like flip a card over and be annoyed that they picked something that I thought wasn't like a super great choice for that particular card. And again, that's a very personal taste thing. It very much like has to do with my own relationship to Buffy as a show and the way that I see things as being symbolized in the show, and the, you know, different themes that it speaks to. And it's super personal, and there are probably a lot of people for whom this deck works just fine, because like those choices work better for their relationship with the show and their relationship with the cards and all that kind of stuff. And it's a shame, because I do really like the artwork of this deck. I think it's really cool. The color palette is cool. It has stuff going for it, but I don't know. It didn't quite do it for me, which is disappointing. But in the end, that's fine. You know, it was an interesting deck to put a lot of thought into, really think about, talk about, discuss. You know, I actually fully finished an entire Buffy rewatch in advance of getting this deck, just so that I would be able to, you know, really discuss the cards and the decisions that the creator made in a meaningful way. And it was really fun, and to rewatch Buffy and think about it. And anyway, you know, so it's not the end of the world, but it just ended up not being the deck that I wanted it to be. Okay, finally, the deck that I got 10 decks ago. This is the Literary Tarot, which I got earlier this year. A lot of folks know the kind of full story of this whole Kickstarter. I'm not going to go into it. We even, again, did a full episode of 3 Girls, 1 Deck, talking just about this deck and about our feelings on the cards and everything like that. I ultimately, with this one, came down on the side of actually really, really liking the deck. This is not to say that it doesn't have its drawbacks, especially in the form of the guidebook. Like, this is one where, like, the Buffy guidebook was like a printer fuck up, you know? This is a guidebook where just the creators like barely even tried in terms of making a guidebook that would make this deck usable if you weren't already completely familiar with all of the literary works referenced by the deck. The guidebook is just not super helpful or explanatory. What you need is a guidebook that doesn't just give keywords in like maybe 2 sentences, you know? You need a deck that actually gives you like a synopsis of the literary work referenced in the card, so that people don't have to read 78 full literary works in order to make any sense of this deck whatsoever. That said, you know, I have a lot of familiarity with the vast majority of the literary works referenced in this deck, so it works fine for me even without the guidebook. But you know, that just so happens to be because I happen to have read a lot of these books. That's the only reason, you know, if it just does not have a useful guidebook, honestly. So there's a lot about this deck though that I really love. I love the artwork, and honestly, at the end of the day, I love the choices that they made for the vast majority of the cards in this deck. You know, I think that they all really make sense, and so many of them I'm like, oh yes, you know, yes, the yellow wallpaper for the 8 of Quills, or quills in the case of this deck is swords, and that's a perfect choice. You know, the Iliad for the 6 of Wands, the Secret Garden for the Ace of Pentacles. Like, Emily of New Moon, which nobody ever talks about and is one of my favorite book series, as the star. You know, it has a lot of really wonderful choices that were made in terms of creating the deck. They just did a really beautiful job. Again, with just a few exceptions, they did a beautiful job matching up the literary work with the card meaning. And then they did a beautiful job illustrating that literary work. So on the whole, I love the deck as a deck to work with. But again, you know, this deck does not have a useful guidebook. So, you know, if the cards don't make immediate sense to you, based on what you see in the card image and the very minimal information that the guidebook gives you, then it's going to be a struggle to read with it. All right, so those are the last 10 decks that I have added to my collection. I hope you enjoyed taking a look at them with me. Thanks so much again to Jonathan Daly for creating this tag. It's just a really fun one. It's fun to talk about what decks you've acquired recently, you know, and like a lot of us, I tend to acquire decks relatively regularly, so this is probably going to be a fun one to revisit, you know, maybe another 8 months to a year down the line and see what other 10 decks I've gotten at that point. But anyway, thanks so much for following along with me. Just as a few shameless plugs, if you like this pretty reading cloth that you have seen in the background, or if you like this pretty bag that I keep my Thistledown Oracle in, you can find items like this on my Etsy shop, where I make a lot of things that I've sewn or crocheted, and in particular a lot of deck bags and reading cloths. So that is Sunset Bow Boutique on Etsy. There's a link down in the description box. There's also a link down to my online store, where you can book a tarot reading with me if you are so inclined. So feel free to check that out as well. And thanks again, everybody. Have a great one. Bye-bye.